All right. New series. New series starting July. It's called King David. We're obviously talking about David. By the way, does anyone remember what happened May of this year? May of this year in the UK? Prince Charles was coronated in the UK on May 6th. Um, there was a big procession. Maybe you saw the news, maybe you saw video clips. Many people attended. VIPs from all around the world attended that celebration. It was a royal ceremony. And it's estimated that the, the royal house spent tens of millions, if not over $100 million, just for that event. And they say this year it was actually scaled back. It was actually scaled back. So imagine if they did it to the full scale that they used to do it, how much more extravagant, how much more grand, how much more costly it would be. When is typically a crown passed down? When a royalty dies, and the next person in line, they get the crown, or they say, I'm no longer fit for whatever reason, they pass the crown. But whenever there's this transfer of power, there's this awesome, grand ceremony. Except David got no such thing. There should have been a coronation. It should have been public. It should have been extravagant. There was none of that. You see, King Saul, the first king of Israel, was rejected. And the Lord instructs Samuel, go anoint David. Now Samuel is terrified because Saul is still alive. So he's instructed to go to Jesse, and he tells him, we're going to have a sacrifice. And David's not even there. Can you imagine that? A prophet of God comes to your house and says, we're going to have a service, right? We're going to have a holy service with you and your family. Your family is there, but you're not, right? Your siblings are there, but what does your dad tell you? Go and do the chores, okay? Go take care of the sheep, or they don't even bother to call you. And Samuel asked, are these all the sons you have? They're still the youngest, Jesse replied, but he's out in the fields watching the sheep and goats. Send for him at once, Samuel said. We will not sit down to eat until he arrives. And that's the scene that David is selected and anointed. There's no royal procession, no VIP guests, no crown, no big celebration. It's just David before his family in his hometown. And you know what? He didn't get to march straight to the throne. David was anointed king by God, but he had no palace to go to. He had no royal army to command, no throne to sit on. He was still a shepherd boy. There's something we all need to keep in mind. When God calls you to do something, that does not mean you will get there right away. God may call you to a task, to accomplish something. It may not happen right away. He may call you to marriage. It may not happen right away. He may call you to parenthood. Just because he calls you does not mean it will happen right away. He may call you to ministry, to be a teacher, to be on praise team, to be a leader in this church. But just because he's called you in your personal relationship, that doesn't mean you're going to automatically catapult into that position right away. In fact, after he even calls you, you may have to endure many, many things. What did David go back to? He went back to tending sheep. Stinky, needy, sheep out in the wilderness. An anointed king goes back into the field to take care of sheep. Let me ask you something. Even though you are called to something greater, even though you have a vision that is much grander, can you still endure and be faithful to your current responsibilities? You want to be a doctor. In fact, you're confident that you're called to be a doctor. Well, can you volunteer right now? You're called to be a leader in this church. Well, can you be faithful to the small role God gave you right now? And you know what? David also went into the service of King Saul. Saul was tormented by a spirit that was troubling him. And whenever David played music, it would soothe King Saul. I want you to imagine this. David is anointed king. Saul is this king that is no longer in good graces with God. But David is called to serve Saul. What would that be like? A couple things I want you to take away from this. First thing, can you still serve in places that are not comfortable? Even though your dream is much grander and great, and the vision you got from God is so much greater, before you even get there, can you humble yourself real low and still serve in places that suck, that's uncomfortable, do tasks you might not enjoy? Can you drop all your pride and serve where there's a need? If you are too big to serve, and you are too small to lead. If you are too big to serve, too small to lead. You want to be on praise team and you're eager to come on the stage? Well, if you're too big to clean up after the equipment, print music sheets, come prepared, arm yourself with prayer and scripture, you know, the stuff that no one actually sees and will give you credit for, then sorry, praise team is not for you. You're not willing to actually praise and commit hours? This is not for you. Praise should be awesome and fun, and praise team can one of the greatest experiences in church. But this is not a garage band. This is not a performance. This is for glorifying God. You want to be a leader in this church? Don't expect to get there if you're not willing to get your hands a little bit dirty, clean up after some mess. And even things outside of the church. You want to make it big and succeed, be a leader, be the top dog. Don't expect to get there if you're not willing to serve in small places. David served Saul. Second thing I want you to get away from this. This is especially for the young people in the crowd. Can you, I know you're not going to like it. Young people, can you respect the authority God has placed over you? I'm going to let that sit in while I drink this water. Young adults, you students, can you respect the authority God has placed over you now? Because many of you want change, you want reform, right? You want the old people to let go of their stubborn ways. Trust me, I'm there right with you, okay? I'm older than many of you, but I'm still young. Trust me, I'm with you there, right? I want some changes. But you know what? Some of you, it's not reform you want revolution. You want to just flip this thing upside down and say, old people, let go, okay? Let us take over, right? You want instant change. But I got some news, young people. It's not just old people that need to change and let go of their stubborn ways. It's you that must change as well. You must first earn the respect of even those younger than you, And you got to endure and be ready. You got to go through some tests. You got to mature a little bit. You have to change as well. Can you trust God through that process, even though things are frustrating right now? David stayed faithful to all his responsibilities until he was fully recognized king. If you won't be faithful to the little things, the boring things, the day-to-day mundane things that no one gives you credit for, you won't be faithful when the exciting things happen, when the big things happen. You have to be faithful with the little things because the test, that comes before you make it, not after. Long before David was ever recognized king, he had to battle. You see, many people think that you have to be fully prepared and ready, and then you face the test. That's not how life works. God chooses to use people not who are fully ready, but who have a heart that's ready. David faced Goliath, who mocked God's army, and this is what he said. He replied to the Philistine, "You come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." You know, it's really easy to say that you trust God and you rely on God when there's no tests, when things are going great. It's easy to say that you trust God with your finances when you're loaded, you got extra cash laying around. It's easy to say you have hope in God when your career is going well, you got no worries. But you know what? Your faith, that'll be tested when you don't have much. When circumstances seem rough, and when people doubt you. I mean, think about it. Wouldn't it be easier if David was already recognized king and he had his royal army to command, his mighty warriors, and then he goes fight Goliath? That's not how it happened, though. People doubted him. In fact, Saul said, you can't do this. He was mocked by his brother. No one stepped up to the plate, and he had to, with no support. He faced Goliath when he had no title. He was just a shepherd boy. But even in the midst of having nothing, no respect, no credit, he trusted God. And it's not his weapon, it's not his sling and stone that he trusted, but he said, "I come to you in the name of the Lord." Remember, David was anointed king by God, but he wasn't fully recognized and accepted as king. Even if you are not accepted and recognized, even when you are nowhere close to achieving that vision, can you just ignore all the noise around you and just trust God? Because a lot of people will talk. David slayed Goliath. What great victory! Gained some real fame, but still wasn't enough to get him to the throne. It stirred Saul's jealousy, and now he was on the run, running away from Saul, living in enemy territory. He had to endure so much before he was recognized king. Even had 2 opportunities to kill Saul, doesn't do it. Because he says, "How dare I slay the Lord's anointed?" You recognize that authority comes from God, and it's not up to him. He could have chosen the easy path, but he chose to do it on God's time. When Saul died, David followed God's direction to go to Hebron. 2 Samuel 2:4. Then the men of Judah came to David and anointed him king over the people of Judah. Can we go back one slide? It says, king over the people of Judah. Judah is one tribe. Do you guys know how many tribes are in Israel? 12. It doesn't say king of Israel, it says people of Judah. Just one. Just one. David was anointed just before his tribe. He's not even fully king. What's the point? Reaching your vision, your calling, doesn't happen dramatically. It happens in steps. I know we want things done now. We want success now. We want fame now. We want achievements now. We want instant maturity in our kids now. Right? That's not how it goes. It happens little by little, one step at a time. Before David was recognized king of all Israel, he was first recognized by Judah, his own tribe, his own family. Before you go out in the world and do anything big, ask yourself, am I respected and admired by those around me? Are you respected and admired by those around you? Your family, your friends, your coworkers, your small groups. Because you know how you earn those respect? It happens in relationship, right? It actually happens in relationship when you're actually loving one another in fellowship. If you're not going to be recognized by those around you, what makes you think you can run a big company? If you won't be recognized by your small group, what makes you think you can be a teacher? What makes you think you can be a leader? David was anointed king. He first earned the respect of his tribe. He first got recognition from his tribe. And you would think, things would go in the right steps, but turns out he's not the only king. 2 Samuel 2, 8 and 9. But Abner, son of Ner, the commander of Saul's army, had already gone to Mahanaim with Saul's son Ishbosheth. There he proclaimed Ishbosheth king over Gilead, Jezreel, Ephraim, Benjamin, and the land of the Asherites, and all the rest of Israel. David got one tribe, but Saul's son got the rest of Israel. When God calls you to do something, guess what? Not everyone is going to be on board. In fact, it may even be the majority who is not on board. When you are called to something, and when you are trying to do something for God, people may get in the way. Saul was finally dead. Many people thought Saul's influence was over, but there's a threat, something that doesn't support you. There's conflict. He's not even fully king, doesn't have the larger territory. Saul's influence still remains. Majority is still against David. How hard it is to be fully built up. How hard it is for the next generation to successfully take over. But you know what? It says in 2 Samuel 3:1, that was the beginning of a long war between those who were loyal to Saul and those loyal to David. As time passed, David became stronger and stronger, while Saul's dynasty became weaker and weaker. It didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen lightning fast. But you know what? David kept doing the right thing. And you know what? His kingdom kept getting stronger and stronger. And those that opposed him got weaker and weaker. It took time. It was a long journey. And you know what? David could have taken the shortcut. He had the chance to kill Saul twice, but he waits. How convenient, how easy that would have been. Just end the suffering, end the life of living in enemy territory. When Saul was in his final battle against the Philistine, and it was apparent that he was not going to survive, Saul took his own life. But there was this man, this shrewd Amalekite. He thought he was going to get a reward if he brought Saul's crown and armband. And you know what? He claimed, I'm the one that killed Saul out of mercy because it looked apparent he was injured, and to put him out of his misery, I'm the one that killed Saul. In 2 Samuel 1:15 and 16, David said to one of his men, kill him. So the man thrust a sword into the Amalekite and killed him. You have condemned yourself, David said, for you yourself confess that you killed the Lord's anointed one. David, imagine that. If this guy killed Saul, really killed Saul, he brought him the crown. Isn't it good for David? It would be so much easier. But David said, you've done wrong by touching the Lord's anointed. If you look at David's journey, you notice that David actually never talks bad about Saul. He has his full respect for Saul that whole time. And you know what? It's not just for Saul, but for also Saul's son. Because when Ishbosheth saw someone was getting weaker and weaker, something similar happens. Two men, brothers, they kill Ishbosheth, Saul's son. Brings David his head thinking that they're going to be rewarded. After all, they got rid of David's enemy, right? The rival king. But David says in 2 Samuel 4:10, someone once told me Saul is dead, thinking he was bringing me good news. But I seized him and killed him at Ziklag. That's the reward I gave him for his news. And David had the two men killed as well. As much as Saul and Ishbosheth was a rival, an enemy of David, that's not how David saw them. And as much as them being gone would have made it easier, David shows his heart. He doesn't choose the easy way, and he didn't approve people taking immoral shortcuts. Listen, in life, I don't care how young you are, how old you are, you will be tempted to take immoral shortcuts. And you know what? You can even wrap it up nice and say, make excuses and justify it. I was really doing it for you. I was really doing it for me and for God's kingdom, but it's a lie. It's an immoral path. It's a shortcut that you should not take. You'll be tempted, especially when you have to endure. Just a tiny sin to get ahead in life. But that's not God's way. We are to trust in God and endure and do it on His time and do it according to His will. David always remains the same, a man after God's own heart. Remain as a person after God's own heart. One day at a time, one moment at a time, you endure. And finally it happened, 2 Samuel 5, 1-3. Then all the tribes of Israel went to David at Hebron and told him, we are your own flesh and blood. In the past, when Saul was our king, you were the one who really led the forces of Israel. And the Lord told you, you will be the shepherd of my people Israel. You will be Israel's leader. So there at Hebron, King David made a covenant before the Lord with all the elders of Israel, and they anointed him king of Israel. David was anointed 3 times. Once in secret as a shepherd boy. Second, only before his tribe. And third time, finally before all of Israel. But here's the thing. Long before he was recognized king, he acted like a king. Before he was recognized as leader, he already was leading. Can we go back one slide? To verse 2. In the past, when Saul was our king, you were the one who really led the force of Israel. When David got no recognition, no respect, when no one realized who David was, he was already leading. He already had the heart of a king, and he was acting like the leader of Israel. People's view of David changed, but David never changed here. He was always the same, a man after God's own heart, in the wilderness, in the great times, whether he had people recognizing him or whether he he had God's army by his side, whether he had many followers or not, he always had that heart. Be like King David. Long before people ever recognize you, always keep a heart after God's own heart. Let's pray.